how many guys are going to get up in their pulpit and like across the board cancel a sin that resides in someone's heart? How can you get up on a platform?
I'm going to speak to the ones online because there's nobody in here, right?
In a moment that has shocked many within the Christian community, a well-known Pentecostal pastor, a husband, a father, and a ministry leader has publicly confessed to something deeply personal and deeply painful. Ted Shuttlesworth Jr., a prominent evangelist and co-pastor, has announced that he is stepping away from ministry, at least for now, after admitting to cheating on his wife and engaging in what he described as inappropriate conversations with other women. And this isn't just another headline, because behind the public statements, behind the apology letter and behind the ministry titles, there's a real family, there's real consequences, and real questions. How does something like this happen? What does accountability look like? And can a leader truly come back after a fall like this? Let's talk about it. For those who may not be familiar, Ted Shuttlesworth Jr. isn't a small-name preacher. He is the co-pastor of Miracle Word Church, a ministry he leads alongside his wife, Carolyn, in Florida. Over the years, he's built a large platform. He's authored nearly 20 books, co-founded Miracle Word Ministries in 2010, launched educational programs, hosted crusades, run online media outreach, and even founded Miracle Word University. He also hosts his own podcast that travels internationally and has been associated with a newer media-savvy generation within the prosperity gospel movement. But perhaps what makes this story even more significant is his background. Ted Jr. comes from what many call a preaching dynasty. His father, Ted Shuttlesworth Sr., is a well-known televangelist and revivalist who leads Faith Alive Fellowship. Other family members are also in ministry, including his uncle, Tiff Shuttlesworth, and his cousin, Jonathan Shuttlesworth. In other words, ministry isn't just what he does, it's part of his identity, his family legacy, his entire life, which makes what happened next even more difficult to process. In a private letter sent to ministry partners and later obtained by media outlets, Ted Jr. made a confession, and his words were direct. He said, in the middle of ministry success, miracles, and breakthroughs, he let his guard down. He admitted he failed to stand firm when temptation came, and then he said something that hit many people hard. He acknowledged that his actions opened the door for sin through loose and inappropriate conversations with women. No excuses, no blaming, just responsibility. But the confession didn't stop there. He went further, revealing that those conversations eventually led to sexual activity with a woman who was not his wife. And he said he was extremely ashamed and deeply grieved. You can almost hear the weight in those words, because when a spiritual leader falls, it doesn't just affect one person. It affects a marriage, a family, a congregation, and thousands of people who looked up to him. He then announced something many expected, but still felt heavy to hear. For now, he is stepping away from ministry, not permanently, but intentionally. He said he has repented before God, and asked for healing and protection for his family. He also said he repented to his wife, Carolyn, describing her as the greatest gift God has given him besides salvation. He called her gracious, strong, unbelievable, and honestly, in situations like this, the spouse often carries the deepest wounds, because betrayal inside marriage, especially public betrayal, cuts in a unique way. But here's where the story becomes even more complex. In his letter, Ted also hinted at something else. He said if God in his mercy gives him another opportunity, he would be willing to answer the call again. In other words, this may not be the end of his ministry story. And that raises an important conversation many people are already having. What does restoration actually mean? And how long should it take? Soon after his statement, his wife, Carolyn, also released her own letter, and her words were honest, but also full of faith. She confirmed that her husband had been involved in an affair, along with multiple inappropriate conversations with various women, but she also reassured supporters that nothing they had prayed, given, or sown into the ministry was in vain. She emphasized that God had still moved lives had still changed, and souls had still been reached. That's an important perspective in Christian theology, the idea that God can work through imperfect people. Still, emotions around that idea can be complicated, because when trust is broken, yet people don't just process theology, they process pain. Carolyn acknowledged the disappointment many would feel and encouraged supporters not to let one man's failure diminish what God had done through their faithfulness. But then she shared something deeply personal. She said, "If anyone understands the pain and sorrow caused by this situation, it is her and their family." That line says a lot. That line says a lot because behind every public scandal, there are private tears nobody sees. She also spoke about repentance and the restoring mercy of God, saying she believes God's grace will continue to sustain their ministry. And she made another announcement during the season: while Ted steps back, she will step forward into greater leadership responsibility. That alone shows strength, because leading while wounded is not easy. She ended her message with a request. She asked people to extend forgiveness toward her husband, just as she has chosen to forgive, and just as Christ has forgiven believers. That word, forgiveness, is powerful, but it's also complicated. Forgiveness doesn't always mean instant trust. It doesn't always mean immediate restoration, and it doesn't remove consequences. Those things take time. The couple also has 3 children, which reminds us, again, and this isn't just a ministry situation, it's a family situation. And families often carry the longest journey toward healing. So what happens next? That's the question everyone's asking. Will Ted Shuttlesworth Jr. return to ministry? If he does, when? And what kind of accountability will be in place? History shows in religious communities, and restoration stories do happen, but healthy restoration usually requires 3 things: time, transparency, and true accountability. Not just words, but demonstrated change. There's also a broader lesson here. Beyond one pastor, leadership, especially spiritual leadership, comes with pressure, constant travel, public expectations, private temptations, emotional exhaustion. None of those excuse wrongdoing, but they do explain why accountability structures matter so much. No leader, no matter how gifted, is above human weakness. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway. Charisma, platform, influence, success, none of those replace character, because eventually what's hidden comes into the light, always. For supporters, this moment may feel confusing. For critics, it may feel predictable. For his family, it likely feels devastating. But for everyone watching, it's a reminder. Integrity matters more than image. Faithfulness matters more than fame. And private choices always shape public impact. As this situation continues to unfold, many people will be watching, praying, questioning, and forming opinions. But one thing is certain: real healing, whether in ministry or marriage, is a process, not an announcement. If you want more thoughtful breakdowns on faith, leadership, and real-life stories like this, make sure you subscribe and join the conversation. And if you have thoughts about restoration in ministry, share them respectfully in the comments, because these conversations matter.